So this is the Sony A7CR, and Sony done lost their damn mind. Now, stay for the end because there's a story of how I got this camera, and I want to make sure I share it because it's kind of ghetto. But I've had the honor and the privilege of using this camera for over a year for not only photo shoots. I've been able to use this on real photo shoots, real commercial shoots, corporate clients. I've even done a little bit of like fitness shoots, even in the summer. You'll be shocked at some of the results. Just to give you a little bit of an intro, this thing has that 61 megapixel sensor. Of course, you know that from the A7R5. It shoots SOG3 just like the Sony FX3 and this Sony FX6. Of course, these shoot Cine EI, but I have easily been able to match this SOG3 to these cameras. Not to mention, you get the new AI autofocus. You also get 7 stops of in-body image stabilization, which you would need with a small body like this. And lastly, I can speak to the fact that this 4K 60 is actually extremely usable. It does have a 1.2 times crop, but when I tell you usable, I mean extremely usable. Having usable video features and these incredible overkill, like just bombastic photo features allows this camera to be a nice one-stop shop for a lot of people out there. Oh, and last thing, frame rates for photos. It shoots up to 8 frames per second. So if you're looking for something that has speed, this ain't it. Like, it's gonna shoot good photos, but this ain't just sports camera. The A7 IV shoots faster than this. That's just what you get when you're putting the big sensor and the small body, you know that. First off, let's talk about image quality, all right? First thing, I am a bad influence on my friends and my fellow shooters because I've let some of them rent and borrow this thing, and as soon as they come back, they give it to me and they go and buy either this camera, the A7CR, or they buy an A7R5. Again, bad influence. And this also applies to my friends that are hybrid shooters, and the reason why is because this thing is a literally one-stop shop. Because when I break it down to them and I hand them this small itty-bitty body, this baby, this thing that looks like a toy, and I say things like, oh yeah, it has a 61 megapixel sensor, they're like, oh, why? Like, huh? What do you mean? What do you mean what I mean? They're like, oh, so, and it's full frame? Like, yeah, it's full frame. And I show them, I'm like, okay, it's full frame. What about the video? And I'm like, oh, well, the video shoots 4K 24, 4K 30, 4K 60, 4K 60. What do you mean 4K 60? That's literally their responses when I tell them about this little bitty camera. From the image quality in photos, as an owner of so many random cameras over the years, this camera has produced some of the most beautiful pictures I've ever produced, like easily. And I've owned things like the 5D Mark III. I've owned the original Canon R, the Canon R5, Sony A7 III, the Canon R6. I've owned so many nice full frame cameras. And of course I have a A7 IV. I still have my A7 IV. And I can tell you, this camera here beats everything I've ever owned, with an exception to the Canon R5. I think they're pretty neck and neck. The thing is these R sensors that Sony makes, they have a little special sauce. They just have a look to them that you can't really deny. I remember when one of the really viral photographers that was out there, his name is Kai Boet. He was one of the first people that I saw use the A7R III, and this camera is that DNA from that camera. It's just, it gives you that same flavor, and they always have this specific look and flavor that come out of the A7R cameras. For my photographers with terrible aim, 61 megapixels, so that way if you miss and you terribly frame a photo, you have no issues reframing and making sure you get a usable photo, but aim better, please. And believe it or not, because it does have that new BIOS processor going on, it's not bad in low light. Now, the other thing I've been getting out of this on the photo side is that Super 35 crop. Obviously 61 megapixels for the full frame, but when you use Super 35, 26 megapixels. So that is an extremely usable, like that is like even better than the, I think the A7 III had a 24 megapixel sensor. So 26 megapixels is more than usable. So if I'm using something like a 24 to 70, I'm getting an additional reach at that 70 end that I wouldn't get on a lot of other photography cameras that I use. Okay, let's talk video. So for video, again, this thing is extremely capable. You get the 4K 24, 4K 30, 4K 60 with a 1.2 times crop. And of course, you can shoot 1080p at 120 frames per second. And guess what? That 1080p, 120 frames per second coming out of this type of sensor, 61 megapixel 8K sensor, it's still gonna be pretty usable. And it's even more usable when we live in a world filled with all this AI. You can just up-res it with something like Topaz and you can still get an extremely usable version of that 4K that is converted from 1080p, 120 frames per second. Trust me, easy. But I will say from a look perspective, these cameras, this FX3 and this FX6, they have a look. They look like cinema cameras. They look like video cameras. This being a 61 megapixel photo sensor, although it shoots incredible video, you can still tell that it's a hybrid camera's video. It's good. It looks great now, but it just, you know, when you've been living in the, you know, FX line, cinema line, it's kind of hard to like ignore that special sauce that's kind of dripped in there, you know, but this still has sauce. It just ain't the same sauce as this. Think of it like, you know, when you're shooting good video with the A7 IV, when you're shooting good video with something like the A6700, but this just happens to be full frame and you can actually shoot, instead of a extremely cropped 4K 60, you're getting a nice full frame 4K 60, but again with a slight crop. Last thing I'll add about the 4K 60 is it is line skipped 4K 60. I'm guessing they did that, of course, because of like, let's avoid overheating. I'm pretty sure they did it to compress file sizes, things like that. But do I notice it when I'm using this camera? Absolutely not. There have been some cameras in the past. I ain't gonna lie to you. Even some cameras in the past, you see that fringing, you see some line, you can literally see the lines in the footage, and it's like, bro, what do you what do you want me to do with this? But with this camera, I've used this for video a lot, and I don't notice anything. Again, I'm gonna have footage on this video so you can see it, 4K 60, 4K 24. Just, you know, take a look, you'll see what I mean. Going back to the overheating and avoiding that's the reason why this thing doesn't shoot 8K like the A7R5. Now, still sticking to video, because this thing is 61 megapixels, I don't advise going over 6400 ISO when it comes to video. Obviously, the native ISO is going to be 800 and I think 3200, but I wouldn't go over 6400. Obviously, a lot of us may not even need to go over 6400. Ain't no low light beats like these things here. You know, you could put these here in a closet and it's still gonna see your clothes. Like that's how crazy these FX line cameras are. This don't do that. Okay, so we don't want to do it. You're gonna introduce a lot of noise. So this sensor can get really noisy when you're trying to push it like some of these lower megapixel cinema cameras, of course. All right, so let's move on to body and design. All right. The video gonna go all the way down here from here. I might as well just let you know I ain't going to sugarcoat you. It comes in the same body as the A6700. So for some of you, my friend Meg, she loves this camera because of its small size. Hey man, I'm gonna be honest with you. I like my cameras to have more meat on the bone, all right? I like my cameras BBW. I like them big, beefy, and wide, okay? So that's the reason why typically I have this in a cage, whether it be, I have a cage from Tilta and I have a cage from Small Rig. Love them both. They add a little bit more, because look, man, I can barely put 4 fingers on this thing, all right? The 4-finger non-discount is crazy. So when it comes to the good in this body, I'm not sure if you've experienced this, but there have been some cameras I've experienced that didn't have the 3 custom buttons. So at least you have 3 custom buttons. You know how we do. We want to have custom 1, 24 frames. We want to have custom 2, 60 frames, and custom 3, 180 frames. So, not 180, 120 frames. The other good is the fact that we do get that front dial. I think a lot of these C cameras and the smaller cameras like this, they come without a front dial. Historically, I think they have. This is my first one that was this size. So it does have that front dial, and you can customize all those: front dial, back dial, and of course your control wheel here. And for me, I use those to control the holy trinity: my aperture, my ISO, and also of course that shutter speed. So I like being able to have a front dial. That is a pro feature, I guess. You know, I always hate the roast gear, but we're gonna roast this thing. We finna talk mad about this thing right now. Okay, so obviously we got to keep this thing small. We got to keep this thing, you know, cheap-ish. You have your headphone jack at the bottom, and then you have your mic jack at the top. We kind of like to put them side by side. Don't worry about that. USB-C, and then you have one SD card slot. What I've done for myself is I have one of these Angel Birds, and this Angel Bird is a 256 gig. You can get them even bigger than that. So you don't have those dual card slots. A lot of you, that may be a non-negotiable instantly. Now, stay to the end. Again, I do have that story, but it does have a micro HDMI. I used to not care about that because, again, the reason why I wanted this camera was specifically to vlog, to have a smaller setup so I can like record BTS. You've seen some of my videos where I have a lot of BTS in them. The other thing it doesn't have is a joystick. You have to press the enter button in the middle, and then you have to move it, then you have to lock it again pressing the enter button, or you can use your finger and just slide around. I mean, I guess, but I see this space right here, and I'm just like, hey man, we could have put a joystick right here, like to make it a little bit better. I mean, it would have been perfect. It would have been kind of perfect, but we didn't do that. And the other thing is I know this is like a requirement, but the small viewfinder is just, I mean, I look through it, but most of the time I try to look through it, but most time I just do this. Even though this is the smaller C body, I think when you're spending this much on the body, even though it is a small body, it's still a $3,000 body. Hey man, we could have got a better screen. I still think we could have got a better screen. That is literally, typically that is my only gripe with Sony, is that your screens suck. Even though we buy so many monitors, PlayStations, all kinds of stuff. What is going on? Why can't y'all improve the screens? I don't know why. I would love to come to a meeting and we can talk about the screens. Are you making them out of recycled plastic? I don't know. They suck. All right, I'm done with that tangent because I'm getting upset. To give you an exact for the EVF, it is a $2.36 million EVF. Not really, it's not impressive. And that's okay, that's not what you buy this camera for. But, when you look at that A7R5 and it be flipping and all that stuff, boy, listen, that thing got tricks. And that's all I'm gonna say, because it's getting weird. Now, for the very good, this is a new feature to these cameras. This thing is fully touchscreen. So I know that sounds like, because you could touch focus and everything. No. You remember how we wanted our Canon cameras, like we love that about the Canon cameras, that you can change ISO and shutter speed and all those things by touching the actual screen. This camera does it. This menu does it. I don't know what took them so long, but this is a very good thing. This is a very good direction you're going in, Sony. So for the next cameras that you release, like the next FX3 Mark II, if that ever exists, we would love to see that. All right, so I'm gonna start adding sections to my product reviews called Rapid Fire. So we're just gonna go through some additional random features of this. Again, we're gonna have photos, videos still going, but let's talk about some things. So who is this for? That's the first thing I wanna address. Man, I don't know. This camera can be for someone that wants to have a one camera that does it all, so you can have good video, good photo. This can be that. But for a lot of people, this is that ideal size for a travel. And when you look at the body, especially when you look at this body in the other color, the direct competitor is trying to tackle, and that's going to be those film-like cameras. When I say film-like, not cinematic, but like film cameras, the Fuji cameras. So this here is like a glorified, way better Fuji X100V. But the other thing is, again, it's a very confusing product because it also has all those vlogger features in here, like the soft scan thing, like the AI autofocus, like the auto reframing. It has those things. So this thing is a very confusing camera. That's the reason why I say I don't know who it's for, and that's the reason also why I have this section in it, because this camera can do too many things and I don't know who it's trying to talk to. Now, again, I'm gonna tell you the story now because we're in rapid fire. When I bought this camera, I didn't buy this camera. I originally bought the A7C II, and I was gonna use the A7C II for vlogging. That was going to be because the A7 IV had a good sensor. I was like, man, I just want a smaller camera to like take around, vlog, take pictures, easy to travel with, but also easy to record myself. Nothing crazy. Well, I ordered the A7C II and they sent me an A7CR. And I was like, okay, this is awkward. So of course I'm like, hey, you sent me the wrong camera. And obviously, I still got the camera. And that's literally how I got this camera. I didn't talk about autofocus. Autofocus is top notch, okay? So I took this camera with me to my friend Patty. She did a High Rocks race, and we were using all the lenses. I was using Sigma 24-70, but the lens that I rented was the Sony G-Master 70-200 GM2. My God, when I tell you sticky autofocus, when you match the new Sony technology to the new technology here, I'm gonna tell y'all something. It is by far the best autofocus you can find on the market. This thing is stupid. It is too smart. I don't know how they're doing it, and I don't even know how they're gonna improve on it, but my goodness, I was autofocusing from distances and I would tap the eye and it just kept going. I need to screen record next time when I'm out and I'm doing like fast-paced stuff, but the autofocus is stupid. Stupid is good. In black community, stupid is good, and stupid is bad, but stupid is also good. You got it. One day I'm gonna do like a course to be like, bad means good, but good is good, and bad can be bad, but bad also means good. Overheating. It doesn't. Like, I've not had any overheating with this camera, and I know with these bodies, especially pushing this much power out, you may run into some overheating with other models, but I'm gonna let you know something. I've shot with this thing on 12-hour shoots. I shot with this thing on 4-hour shoots, photo shoots, video shoots. I've filmed podcasts with it. Now, keep in mind, I used to use this camera as this camera. Now this, FX3 is the B camera, but I actually used to use my A7CR as my B camera for my podcast, for my YouTube, and it just runs and does its thing. IBIS, I said something a little bit in the intro about IBIS, but originally, it's a 5-stop without the active stabilization on. The 5 stops of IBIS in this body. When you turn on the active stabilization, which is very good, you get 7 stops. And then I think you can add an additional stop when you add a Sony lens that has OSS. So I think that goes up to 8 stops. But obviously, you know this, we don't really have a lot of OSS lenses being released now because the in-body stabilization and these new Sony cameras are that good that it's like, what's the point in adding that feature? I get it, but we kind of liked it back in the day. Last rapid fire, I want to talk about competition. So with competition, man, it's hard to figure out where this camera fits, and the reason why is because it's like really good at photo from an image quality perspective, but it's still not fast enough. But it's 61 megapixels and it's a beautiful photo sensor, and it's also a good video sensor. It's a very pretty video sensor, but it only shoots 4K 60 when we have a lot of cameras now, the Canon R5s, the Nikon Z8s, even the Sony ZV-E1 that shoot 4K 120, like 8K. Like, we have just different things going on in the video and the photo space. But this thing is meant to be, I'm pretty sure, an all-around camera because it's so good at so many things, but it's not an expert at anything outside of image quality that I feel. Outside of, I would say, my FX3, this would have to be my favorite camera that I've ever owned. And the reason why is it reminds me so much of when when we used to run around with the Sony A7 III. And the reason why we love the A7 III, a lot of us shot some of that 4K, but we really, at the time, 1080p was, what you needed to have. And what we loved about the A7 III is that it could shoot 1080p, 24, 30, 60, and of course, 120 frames. We could do everything with it. We could flip it to the photo side and we can get good photos with it. It could do everything. And that's what this reminds me of, is that this camera can do everything. And obviously it's more expensive than a regular alpha camera as far as like the A7, because this is one of the R's, but we've never had an R sensor that was able to do all these things. I think the other R sensors, there were some caveats with the video, but my goodness, this thing is extremely capable, and it just reminds me of just having those one camera conquers all and does everything for you, like we used to do before we were able to afford all these extra cameras. Either way, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe to the channel. If you've ever experienced using one of these, please tell me what you think about it. Did you enjoy it? What did you hate about it? I know it's probably the same stuff I hated, but either way, more content to come using this camera on photo shoots and video shoots, because I want to make sure that I cover those things. A lot of the shoots that you're seeing in the BTS and in the footage that you're seeing, I'm gonna cover those shoots. I actually filmed BTS footage of those shoots, so be on the lookout for that. But either way, again, like, comment, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all in the next video. I love y'all.